Matoto market in the Guinean capital, Conakry. The military police arrive in force. A uniformed man has just been spotted. Since mid-January, authorities have been cracking down on soldiers who continue to wear their uniform while on leave. They should be wearing civilian clothes. The aim of the operation is to restore the public image of the army. More than half of the enlisted men have no current orders. Some of them are accused of extortion and of threatening Guineans.
We see armed soldiers all the time. They could kill or terrorize people.
Some soldiers are crooks, but the ones who came here to make the arrest, they're the real soldiers. We're pleased. I'm especially pleased.
That's something once unheard of in Guinea, civilians praising soldiers. The arrested men are brought to the Alpha Yaya Diallo camp for interrogation. With cameras present, the army spokesman, Commander Aliou Diakité, takes charge.
You're not a police officer, are you?
No, Commander.
You're going to be remanded.
Take that off. You can't wear that. It's over.
And you?
I'm a cadet.
Your card? He's not on duty, he's not on leave, he's AWOL. People think a man like this is an active police officer and believe that the police are harassing people. But he's not even a member of the force.
You can't wear that. Take it off. It's over.
The actions of these uniformed men are a hangover of 50 years of dictatorship. This particular day, a dozen were arrested. It's not clear what happened to them next. Officially, they'll be brought to trial. But justice moves slowly in Guinea. These men and women have been waiting for it for more than 2 years. They're the survivors of an army massacre. On the 28th of September 2009, security forces opened fire on a political rally in this stadium. 150 people were killed and more than 1,000 injured.
I'm getting flashbacks, images of what happened on 28th of September 2009, what we suffered here.
It's the first time these survivors have returned here since the events.
That's where I fell and survived.
They say they know who the perpetrators were and that they're still at large.
The perpetrators are in the government. Perhaps that's why the authorities are dragging their feet.
Thousands of people had gathered in the stadium to protest the presidential bid of Dadis Camara, at the time the head of the military junta. The majority of the crowd was from the Fulani ethnic group. NGOs say they were deliberately targeted.
The truth has to come out, and the guilty parties have to be identified and punished. The victims are drying their tears and now want national reconciliation, just like the president is advocating.
For that national reconciliation to succeed, the survivors are asking the current president to open a dialogue with the opposition. Recently, more than 10,000 people came to hear Cellou Dalein Diallo, the losing candidate in the 2010 presidential election. Flanking him, the other important opposition leaders, they're unified in their criticism of the president and the repeated postponement of the legislative elections.
We're leading this fight so that we can have a parliament, a national assembly that can play its power-balancing role, its role as a check on government action.
Diallo's supporters spilled onto the streets to put pressure on the government. They're sure that if the general election were held tomorrow, in free and fair conditions, Diallo's party would come out ahead of that of President Alpha Condé.
In the current conditions, his party could not win the necessary majority to give him the legitimacy he lacks or to control the parliament. Remember that in the first round of the presidential election, he and his party won just 18%. Leaders of parties that were in his coalition, like Lansana Kouyaté and others, want to run under their own flags now. Condé wants to win the majority with the Rally for the Guinean People, but that's impossible.
In the presidential palace, Alpha Condé disagrees. He denies any suggestion he's trying to put off elections.
If anyone is anxious to organize elections, it's me. Why? Though I won only 18% in the first round of the presidential election, I said straight away that I would win. Now that I'm president, the people will rally behind me. So I'm more anxious for elections than anyone. Those who say otherwise don't know the reality of the situation.
More than a year after the presidential election, Guinea is still in flux. The National Transitional Council has served in place of a parliament for the last 2 years. Presiding over the chamber is the Speaker of the Assembly, Rabiatou Sera Diallo. A well-known union activist, she's long fought for democracy. A fight, she says, is far from over.
We can't call it a democracy because there are still missing elements. It's our plan. We're working on it. We're on the ground. But all the elements have to be in place before we talk about a real democracy. And at the moment, the parliamentary elections are a missing piece.
No parliament, no constitutional court. Guinea's institutional vacuum could be dissuading investors. The country is not lacking in resources. It's rich in gold, diamonds, iron and bauxite, and its abundant fresh water has given it the nickname the Reservoir of West Africa. How can such an asset-rich country be so poor? Kamsar on the west coast lies 4.5 hours by road from the capital. Here is one of the biggest bauxite refineries in the world. Guinea has the Earth's largest reserves of the ore, an important source of aluminium. 520 employees work around the clock to process 14 million tons of the mineral a year.
You have to load more dry stock. We're only loading on one line at the moment because there's not enough dry stock.
After a long career abroad, Kamoko Touré has returned to work for his country as the head of CBG, the Guinean Bauxite Company, which is 49% state-owned. The remaining 51% is held by mining industry multinationals. CBG is the country's biggest earner, bringing in $60 million a year, but that's a paltry sum compared to the potential value of Guinea's resources. The new president wants to revisit the country's mining laws so that the state can get a better return from the exploitation of its natural resources.
What I hope for is simply that the laws that cover industrial relations and financing will allow us to balance the interests both of investors and of Guinea. But above all, investment funds must be well managed. You can introduce any law you like, but if the governance isn't there, the money will not help development.
In the next few years, this refinery hopes to increase its production of bauxite to 20 million tonnes a year, which would make it the world's biggest producer. That's the kind of economic growth that Guinean farmers would like to see. 70% of the population lives off the land. One of President Condé's priorities is agricultural self-sufficiency. Last year, he distributed fertilizer and materials to vegetable and rice farmers. But in Kindia, a centre for pineapple farming, there's still a shortage of fertilizer and of funds.
Once Guinea was a major producer of pineapples because we could export them and earn hard currency. But Guinea lost its place in the market. We have to rise to the challenge. We need fertilizer if we're going to expand our business.
Poor infrastructure makes it difficult to distribute fruit and other produce over a wide territory. We're back in the capital, Conakry. Aminata and Masire shop at the Niger market. They have to buy food for 10 people. Their budget for the day is 100,000 Guinean francs, a little under 10 euros. They have to count every cent.
How much does that cost?
10,000.
And that?
6,000.
Everything is expensive in the market. Condiments and staple foods too. All the basic items are expensive. It makes things difficult.
The median salary in Guinea is around 50 euros a month. For most of the population, it's a daily struggle to scrape together enough money to live on. To help look after her 3 children, Masseret runs a food stand outside her home. Her cooking brings in 50,000 francs, around 5 euros a day.
With this small business, I manage to meet my children's needs. With the money I earn, I pay for their education and their healthcare. I can send them to hospital and I can dress and feed myself properly too. And I can save 10,000 francs a day.
Despite her difficulties, Masseret considers herself lucky. Her city centre neighbourhood has electricity throughout the day. It's a different story just a few blocks away. Residents of the usually quiet Dixine district are up in arms. The blackout happened at just the wrong time, as the Guinean national soccer team was about to kick off its first match of the Africa Cup of Nations. The president promised a reliable electricity supply, but people living in Conakry have power for only 16 hours a day. The situation won't improve until planned hydroelectric and thermal power stations are completed. That's why this airport parking lot has become a makeshift study hall. At nightfall, several dozen students gather to sit on the tarmac under the street lamps, the only reliable source of light. Tierno and Abu Bakar have been coming here for 7 years. They were born during the military dictatorship. They're part of a generation that's aching for change.
It hurts. It really upsets me to see the state the country is in. It's awful that despite all our wealth, we don't have electricity. They say that Guinea is the reservoir of West Africa, but we don't even have electricity. The electricity supply comes and goes. It's the same with water. When I look at the way things are, I feel sorry for the country.
One of these students wants to be a doctor, the other a diplomat. Both of them dare to believe that the new Guinea promised by its leaders will allow them to fulfill their dreams.